The dinner table was silent, too silent, until Clara's voice shattered the air like glass breaking in slow motion. "You've been at that company for years, Ethan," she said, her tone sweet on the surface but dripping with venom. "And yet, after all this time, you're still nothing." Still invisible, Ethan froze. The fork in his hand stopped midair, trembling, as if even the silver refused to carry food to his lips. Her gaze drilled into him, stripping away every last fragment of his pride. The woman who once kissed him goodnight now looked at him like a failed experiment, a man not worth the air he breathed. Clara leaned back, swirling her wine with lazy cruelty, lips curving into a mocking smile. "Maybe," she paused, savoring the silence like a blade at his throat. "The fastest way for you to finally get promoted is for me to spend some time with your boss." The world stopped. The words hung in the air, heavy, poisonous, impossible to take back. Ethan's heart pounded, every beat slamming against his chest like it wanted to break free. Surely she was joking. Surely no wife could look at her husband and propose such a thing without shame. But Clara wasn't joking. Her red lips parted, her eyes gleamed with cruel amusement, and her posture screamed one thing: challenge. No shame, no hesitation, only raw, merciless contempt. Ethan's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed at him to yell, to smash the table, to demand how she could humiliate him like this. But instead, he swallowed. His hand trembled as he set the fork down, the clink of metal on porcelain echoing like a funeral bell. "Maybe you're right," he whispered, the words tasting like ashes, burning as they left his mouth. Clara smirked, triumphant, her eyes gleaming with pride, certain she had crushed him completely. Ethan lowered his gaze, shoulders heavy, silence pressing against his chest like stone. For Clara, it was victory. For Ethan, it looked like defeat. "So tell me, if you were in his place, what would you do? Would you scream? Would you walk away? Or would you stay silent, swallowing humiliation whole just to survive another day? Stay with me, because what happens next will make you question how far betrayal can push a broken man." Ethan was the kind of man every company claimed to value: diligent, loyal, never once complaining. He arrived early, stayed late, and delivered every report on time. His colleagues trusted him, respected him, even liked him. He was the man who would cover for others, the man who remembered birthdays, the man who never raised his voice in anger. But in a corporate world built on ambition and ruthless politics, loyalty and hard work were rarely enough to climb the ladder. 10 years had passed, and Ethan was still in the same modest office, still signing beneath the decisions made by others. He dreamed of one day sitting in the manager's chair, but that dream only seemed to drift farther away, as if taunting him. Clara, his wife, was different. From the first time she met Ethan, she was drawn to his gentleness, his honesty, his patience. She thought she had found stability, a man who would never betray her, a man who would always be there. But what once felt like safety soon revealed itself as stagnation. Clara began to see what Ethan lacked: ambition, fire, power. She was beautiful, seductive, the kind of woman who turned heads when she walked into a room, the kind who thrived on admiration. And Clara never saw her beauty as something to be cherished in a quiet marriage. It was, to her, a weapon, a bargaining chip, a ticket to a world of glittering lights and endless luxury. She longed for grand parties, polished cars, sprawling mansions, the life of a lady of society, adored and envied in equal measure. And every time she looked at Ethan, hunched over spreadsheets, scraping together payments for their small apartment, a wave of disgust washed over her. Her voice grew sharper with each passing year, her words like poisoned daggers cloaked in silk. "Are you planning to stay a nobody in that office forever? Do you really think your salary could ever buy me a real diamond ring? Look at Richard. Now he knows how to live." Each remark slashed at Ethan's pride, leaving scars no one else could see. But he stayed silent, always silent. He told himself that love required endurance, that one day Clara would see the value in loyalty. Richard, Ethan's boss, was everything Clara believed Ethan could never be: powerful, elegant, always dressed in tailored suits, moving through the world with an air of authority that demanded respect. When Richard entered a room, people noticed. When he spoke, people listened. But behind the polished exterior, Richard carried a reputation, a womanizer, a man whose loyalty never extended past the walls of his own bedroom. The whispers about his affairs floated through the company like smoke, never confirmed, but impossible to ignore. Clara didn't just hear them, she was fascinated. In Richard, she saw not just a man, but an opportunity, a door that could open into the life she craved. Richard's wife, Helen, was a different story. Born into wealth, sharp as a blade, Helen wasn't just the boss's wife. She was a figure of influence in her own right, connected to politics, business, and old money circles. And she knew her husband's flaws all too well. But Helen never played the victim. Instead, she watched quietly, calculating, like a predator hidden in the tall grass, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was patience sharpened into a weapon. Back in their cramped apartment, the quiet war between Ethan and Clara raged on. Ethan worked tirelessly, holding on to the marriage with patience and hope, convincing himself that his devotion could fix what was broken. Clara grew colder, more dissatisfied, openly comparing him to Richard, her eyes gleaming with hunger whenever his name came up. Dinner conversations, once tender, now turned into battlefields filled with barbed remarks and bitter silences. Clara wanted more, far more than Ethan could ever provide, and in her eyes, that hunger no longer needed to be hidden. It burned, sharp and merciless, like a storm on the horizon, promising to tear apart everything in its path. The tension at the dinner table that night was thick enough to choke on. The clinking of silverware had long stopped. Only the faint ticking of the kitchen clock filled the silence. Clara sat across from Ethan, her eyes shimmering with disdain. Her beauty was undeniable, hair cascading over her shoulders, lips painted crimson, but there was poison in her gaze. "You know what I realized today?" she began, her tone casual, almost playful. Ethan looked up, wary. "What?" "I'm that Richard," Clara said, drawing out the name like savoring a forbidden fruit. "Is everything you'll never be." Ethan's grip tightened on his fork. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Clara leaned forward, her voice turning sharp. When he walks into a room, people notice. When he speaks, people listen. And you're just there. Always there, invisible like furniture no one bothers to move. Ethan's heart sank, but he kept his eyes on his plate. She wasn't done. Richard has power. He has presence. And do you know what else? He has ambition. Something you've never had, the words cut deeper than any knife. Still, Ethan sat in silence, holding on to what little composure he had left. Then Clara's lips curled into a smile, mocking, merciless. "Maybe I should do for you what you can't do for yourself." Ethan finally looked up, confusion flashing in his eyes. "What do you mean?" Clara didn't flinch. She didn't soften. She leaned back, sipping her wine slowly before delivering the words like a verdict. "Maybe the fastest way for you to finally get promoted is for me to sleep with your boss." The air left Ethan's lungs in a rush. For a moment, he thought he had misheard. But no, the satisfaction gleaming in Clara's eyes confirmed she meant every word. He stared at her, his world collapsing in silence. The woman he had loved for years, the woman he had vowed to protect, was now offering her body as currency for his career. Ethan's throat burned. Rage clawed at him, screaming to be unleashed. He wanted to smash the glass, shout, demand how she could degrade their marriage so shamelessly. But Clara just tilted her head, as if daring him to protest. "Well, do you want to stay invisible forever, Ethan? Or should I help you?" The words dripped with scorn, each syllable a blade slicing through his pride. Ethan's hand trembled as he set his fork down. His voice was barely audible when he spoke. "Maybe you're right." Clara smirked, her victory complete. She leaned back, basking in the silence, convinced she had broken him. Ethan lowered his gaze. He looked every bit the defeated man, stripped of dignity, reduced to a shadow of himself. But when the lights dimmed that night, Ethan didn't sleep. He lay awake in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying Clara's words like a nightmare on loop. And then, slowly, a thought crystallized. If Clara wanted to play this game, then so be it. But she had underestimated him. At midnight, Ethan slipped out of bed, his movements silent, deliberate. He picked up his phone, scrolled through his contacts, and found the number he had never thought he would dial. Helen, Richard's wife. The line rang once, twice, before a calm, measured voice answered. Hello? Ethan swallowed, his pulse racing. Mrs. Morgan, we need to talk. In that moment, the alliance was born, quiet, dangerous, and inevitable. A partnership forged not out of trust, but out of shared betrayal. Clara thought she had humiliated him beyond repair, but Ethan was done being invisible. This was the beginning. Clara thought she had humiliated him beyond repair, but Ethan was done being invisible. This was the beginning. The tension at the dinner table that night was thick enough to choke on. The clinking of silverware had long stopped. Only the faint ticking of the kitchen clock filled the silence, each second a hammer against Ethan's skull. Clara sat across from him, poised and perfect, every detail of her appearance curated like a weapon. Her crimson lips, her flawless hair, the curve of her dress that demanded attention. But behind the polish was poison, simmering in her eyes. You know what I realized today? She asked suddenly, her tone light, playful, as though they were sharing a private joke. Ethan looked up cautiously. What? That Richard, Clara said, savoring the name as if it were wine on her tongue, is everything you'll never be. The words landed like a slap. Ethan's grip tightened on his fork, his knuckles whitening. He said nothing. Clara leaned in, her voice sharpening. When he walks into a room, people notice. When he speaks, people listen. And you're just there, always there, invisible, like a chair, like wallpaper. Ethan lowered his gaze, but inside his chest, his heart sank like a stone. She wasn't done. Clara never was. Richard has power. He has presence. He has ambition. Do you even know what that word means, Ethan? Ambition? Each word cut deeper, deliberate wounds meant to draw blood. Ethan's throat burned with unshed words, but he stayed silent. Clara smiled, tilting her head with mock pity. You work yourself to the bone, yet you stay stuck in the same pathetic role. Richard, he creates opportunities. You wait for scraps. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself. But the storm inside him raged louder than the silence outside. Then Clara dropped the final blow. Her lips curled into a smile, mocking, merciless. Maybe I should do for you what you can't do for yourself. Ethan looked up, his eyes narrowing. What do you mean? Clara didn't flinch. She didn't soften. She leaned back, swirling her wine as if toasting to her own audacity. Maybe the fastest way for you to finally get promoted is for me to sleep with your boss. The room froze. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. For a moment he thought he had misheard. But no, the satisfaction gleaming in her eyes confirmed she meant every word. He stared at her, his world collapsing. The woman he had vowed to protect, the woman he had built his life around, was offering herself as a bargaining chip. His chest ached, his pride shattered, rage clawed at him, begging to be unleashed. He wanted to slam his fist, to scream, to demand how she could degrade their marriage so shamelessly. But Clara tilted her head, smirking. Well? Do you want to stay invisible forever, Ethan? Or should I help you? Her words dripped with venom, each syllable twisting deeper into his wounds. Ethan's hand trembled as he placed the fork down. His voice was barely a whisper. Maybe you're right. Clara's smirk widened. She leaned back in her chair, victorious, basking in her illusion of dominance. To her, Ethan looked broken, defeated, reduced to nothing more than a shadow, and she relished it. But beneath his bowed head, behind his silence, something else stirred. Not rage, not despair, something colder. That night, when the lights dimmed and Clara slept soundly beside him, Ethan lay awake. Her words replayed in his mind, each one echoing like a cruel refrain, invisible, powerless, weak. He stared at the ceiling, the shadows moving across the plaster, and slowly, a thought began to crystallize. If Clara wanted to play this game, then so be it. But she had underestimated him. At midnight, Ethan slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her. His steps were measured, deliberate. He picked up his phone, scrolled through his contacts, and stopped at a name he had never expected to call. Helen, Richard's wife. His thumb hovered, his pulse racing. Doubt flickered, but only for a second. Then he pressed dial. The line rang once, twice. Finally, a calm, measured voice answered. Hello? Ethan swallowed, his voice low, steady, though his chest pounded. Mrs. Morgan. We need to talk. Silence. Then a pause thick with understanding. In that moment, an alliance was born. Quiet, dangerous, inevitable. Not built on trust, but on betrayal. Not on love, but on vengeance. Clara thought she had humiliated him beyond repair. But Ethan was done being invisible. This was the beginning. Ethan didn't rush. Revenge, he knew, was a patient man's game. After that midnight call, he and Helen began their quiet collaboration. Their conversations were brief, clinical, like business deals, never emotional, always strategic. Ethan tracked Clara's movements. He memorized the rhythm of her lies. Yoga classes on Tuesdays, late happy hours on Fridays, the occasional girls' night out that never included any friends. Each time she returned with the same perfume lingering, the same faint guilt masked by arrogance. Helen worked her end with equal precision. With her family's influence, she had access to Richard's expense reports, his credit card statements, the subtle trail of indulgence he thought hidden. Hotel bills, restaurant reservations, jewelry receipts, it all painted a picture more damning than rumor ever could. Piece by piece, the net closed. Ethan collected screenshots of Clara's messages, photos of her slipping into hotel lobbies, and even the license plate of Richard's car parked outside. Helen gathered financial proof, legal strings ready to pull when the time came. They chose their night with cold calculation. The hotel was confirmed. The room number, 614, circled in red. The manager discreetly bribed, a spare key waiting. When the date was set, Ethan no longer felt rage, only focus, only clarity. That evening, Clara stood before the mirror, adjusting the strap of her silk dress. Her lipstick was a deeper red than usual, her perfume stronger, clinging to the air like sin. I'll be late, she told Ethan casually, not meeting his eyes. Dinner with an old college friend. Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. Have a good night, he said softly. Clara smiled faintly, thinking she had him fooled once again. She grabbed her clutch and left, her heels tapping confidently against the floor. Ethan sat in silence until the door clicked shut. Then he rose, collected his jacket, and walked out into the night. Across town, Helen was waiting in her car near the hotel. When Ethan slipped into the passenger seat, she didn't greet him with words, only a sharp nod. On Ethan's phone, Clara's last message glowed. Don't wait up. At 10:43 p.m., Richard walked into the hotel lobby, checking in with a smirk. At 10:44, Clara followed, her dress catching the light, her laugh echoing as she touched his arm. At 11 o'clock, Helen said, Now. They crossed the lobby like shadows, silent and certain. The manager handed them the key without a word. The elevator ride was suffocating, the numbers climbing too slowly. Ethan's pulse didn't race. It slowed, steady, measured. The hallway smelled faintly of roses and carpet cleaner. They stopped at room 614. Ethan slid the card. The light blinked green, the door clicked open. Inside, laughter snapped into silence. Richard and Clara froze on the bed, clothes scattered like wreckage, wine glasses still half full on the nightstand. The air stank of perfume and betrayal. Clara's face drained of color. She yanked the sheet to her chest, eyes wide, mouth trembling. "Ethan, this isn't what it looks like." Helen stepped forward, her heels sharp against the floor, her voice cutting like steel. "Spare me. I've heard every excuse from him. And now from you." Richard opened his mouth, but one look from Helen reduced him to silence. He shrank back, words dying in his throat. Ethan moved without a word. From his jacket he pulled a folder and dropped it onto the bed. The slap of paper against sheets was louder than any shout. Clara's hands shook as she opened it. Photos, messages, receipts, every betrayal laid bare in black and white. Her breath caught. Her eyes darted between the pages and Ethan's face. For a moment, true fear flickered. Then something twisted. Fear curdled into defiance. Her lips stretched into a smile, bitter, mocking, unhinged. "You think this matters?" she spat, her voice rising. "You've always been weak, Ethan." "That's why I did this. That's why I chose Richard." She turned, locking eyes with Helen, chin lifted like a queen in a ruined court. "And you, Helen, your time is over. I will replace you. I will be the new Mrs. Morgan." Ethan's eyes narrowed, his silence colder than any words. Helen's lips curved, just slightly, as if Clara had already sealed her own fate. Helen's expression didn't flicker. Her heels clicked against the carpet as she stepped closer. "You think Richard owns all this? The cars, the houses, the company?" A short, humorless laugh escaped her lips. "No, it's all mine. Every account, every property, every title, funded by my family. Richard only manages what I allow him to touch." Clara's defiance faltered. She looked at Richard, waiting for denial, for a shred of support. But Richard dropped his gaze. His silence was confirmation. Helen's voice sharpened. "You were never a threat, Clara. You were a toy, and toys are disposable." "No!" Clara screamed, desperation cracking her voice. "Richard loves me. Tell her, Richard. Tell her you'll leave her for me." Richard's lips trembled. Sweat glistened on his brow. Then, to Clara's horror, he fell to his knees before Helen. "Please, Helen," he begged, voice hoarse. "It was a mistake. You're the only one who matters. Forgive me. Don't take it all away." Clara's jaw dropped. "Richard, you can't. You said you wanted me. You said—" But Richard never looked at her. He clutched Helen's hand, his dignity shattered. Helen's eyes burned with contempt. "Stand up, Richard. You're pathetic," Clara sobbed, clawing at the sheets. "You can't do this to me. I gave you everything. I'll be your wife, Richard. Ethan finally spoke, his voice calm, steady, cruel in its clarity. "No, Clara. You didn't give me everything. You sold yourself for nothing. And now look at you, abandoned, humiliated, stripped of even the illusion of love. You called me invisible. But tonight, you disappeared. Not a queen, not even a wife. Just a bargain nobody wanted to keep." Clara collapsed onto the bed, broken, her sobs filling the silence. Ethan turned and walked out beside Helen, never looking back. For Clara, it was the ultimate humiliation. For Ethan, liberation. And for Helen, victory had never been so quiet, or so absolute. The door closed behind Ethan and Helen with a hollow thud, leaving Clara's sobs echoing in the stale air. Richard remained on his knees, broken, while Helen's words lingered like a curse. Tomorrow, it ends. And indeed, it did. The very next morning, the collapse began. Richard arrived at his office only to find his accounts frozen, his phone buzzing with messages from panicked board members. Helen's lawyers had moved fast, filing motions, leaking records, exposing every indulgence he thought he had buried. The newspapers feasted on the scandal. CEO's affairs exposed. Corporate empire in crisis. The whispers that once floated through corridors had become headlines printed in black and white. Richard sat alone in his office, shoulders sagging, the weight of disgrace crushing him. The man who once commanded rooms with a glance now looked like a husk, every ounce of power stripped from him, not by rivals, but by the woman he had underestimated the most. And Helen? She didn't scream. She didn't weep. She simply signed documents, her face cold, detached, while the empire Richard thought was his collapsed beneath her pen. Days later, Clara returned home. The woman who had strutted out in silk now stumbled in with smudged makeup, wrinkled clothes, and a hollow stare. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, calm, collected, papers stacked neatly beside him. He didn't rise when she entered. "Ethan!" Her voice cracked, raw from crying. "I made a mistake. I was blinded. Please give me another chance." Her eyes searched his, desperate, begging for even a flicker of the love she once took for granted. Ethan studied her, really studied her. Once she had been radiant, untouchable. Now she was nothing but ruin wearing human skin. He opened the folder beside him and slid it across the table. Inside, photographs, receipts, messages, every betrayal catalogued, preserved. Clara's breath hitched. You kept everything?" "Yes." Ethan's voice was steady, unshaken. "From the first lie, from the first night you came home smelling of someone else, I kept it all." Her knees buckled, and she collapsed to the floor, tears streaking her face. "Ethan, I have no one else. Richard abandoned me. Helen destroyed me. You're all I have left." But Ethan's eyes held no pity. "You made sure of that," he said quietly. "You didn't just betray me, you betrayed yourself. And now, there's nothing left to save." The shame spread faster than fire. Clara's family, once so proud of her marriage, now avoided her name entirely. They had flaunted her at dinners, boasting of their daughter with a husband in a respected company. But when the scandal broke, when whispers became headlines, when Helen's legal war filled the business pages, Clara became a scar they wished to erase. At gatherings, conversations died when she entered. Her mother wept in silence. Her father turned his face away. Relatives who once envied her jewels and clothes now muttered about disgrace, shaking their heads. The daughter who was once their crown jewel had become their deepest humiliation. Richard disappeared into lawsuits and investigations, stripped of authority, his empire burning down around him. He had no room for Clara, no need, no interest in the woman who had cost him everything. Ethan, meanwhile, walked forward quietly, steadily, with the dignity that had always defined him. He didn't boast. He didn't gloat. He simply left the wreckage behind, free at last from the weight of Clara's contempt. And Clara? Clara was left in silence. Not her lover, not her husband, not even the family that once adored her remained. She sat alone in the dim apartment, the shadows pressing in. The window reflected her face, not the queen she once imagined, but a hollowed woman, consumed by her own choices. For the first time, Clara understood what true invisibility felt like, the kind Ethan had lived with for years. But there was one difference. Ethan had been invisible because he was overlooked. Clara was invisible because she was nothing. The story of Ethan and Clara did not end with fire, nor with blood. It ended with silence. Because sometimes the cruelest revenge is not a knife, not a scream, but the quiet weight of truth pressing down until it breaks the guilty in half. Ethan never raised his voice. He never raised his hand. He simply stepped aside and let Clara walk into the abyss she had carved for herself. There is a truth, bitter yet undeniable. When love becomes a negotiation, marriage has long been dead. And when betrayal is used as a tool to climb, betrayal will always turn back to strike. Clara believed beauty was power. She believed her body was currency. Her lies were strategy. Her ambition was worth any cost. But in the end, she was wrong. Power without loyalty crumbles. Desire without respect poisons. And a queen without love is no queen at all, just a hollow figure waiting to be replaced. Ethan walked away, not as a victor, but as a man freed, his dignity intact, his silence sharper than any weapon. Because sometimes, true revenge is not destroying the other person. It is letting them destroy themselves. So now I ask you, if you were Ethan, what would you have done? Would you have stopped Clara the moment she made her shameless proposal? Would you have screamed, fought, begged for her to stay? Or would you have chosen silence, patience, and a plan as cold as his? Every betrayal has a price. Every lie leaves a scar. But sometimes, scars are not the end. They are the proof that you endured, that you survived. Ethan endured. Ethan survived. And in the end, Ethan walked away free. What about you? If betrayal came knocking at your door, how would you face it? Tell me in the comments. And if this story left you breathless, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because there are more stories waiting, stories of betrayal, of revenge, of survival. And the next one may leave you questioning everything you believe about love.